So what is my end goal with collecting? This is a question I've been getting quite a bit frequently on my recent CEX hauls and some of my TikTok videos. And honestly, I don't have an end goal. I think a lot of collectors do have end goals. Like, for example, they'll be aiming for full sets of things, whether it be every PlayStation 2 game, all of the PlayStation 3 hits, or PlayStation 4 hits, or something like that. But, like, that's not really how I do things. So my method is really pretty simple in that I think of a game and I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have that game. I should get that game. I put it on a list on my phone, and then I keep a tab back there open for CEX, looking at the stores that it's in stock at, and when it's in stock at a store that I'm willing to drive to, I go and get it. And then sometimes my list looks a little bit sparse. Like through July, for example, I had very few games on there. There's a few games on there that have been there for months that are just not getting anywhere, like specific versions of games. So if we just go through some of those, for example, there's a God of War 2 Special Edition that I'm kind of interested in because I think it looks pretty. There's the Ultimate Spider-Man Collector's Edition, which has got the bright purple Venom on the front. I think that looks cool. There's a few games. Actually, here's one like little goal that I have is the majority of the PlayStation 2 games that I have about 100. I have 3. You can't see the games. You can see the DVDs, but you can see the games back there. I have 3 shelves of PS2 games, which is about 150 games. But the majority of them were from when I was a kid. Granted, when I lived with my mom until like 2 years ago, once the PS3 era console came out in like 2007 or so when I was like 9, I was born in 1998, all of my PS2 games sort of went into storage in the back of one of her wardrobes because like we lived in like a 2-bed council house and her room was disproportionately larger than mine and she had so much storage, it was crazy. Whereas I had like no storage. So like 2 of my collecting goals have been, one, while I was in that old house, a lot of my PlayStation 3 and my Xbox stuff, my cases anyway, got sun damaged because the cases had to live on the windowsill because there was nowhere else for them to live. And while they were there, I don't know if you guys have ever seen what happens to a game case that is exposed to daylight for every hour that there is daylight for literally a decade, but they don't last long. They don't last long at all. Luckily, that did not happen to any of my PlayStation 2 stuff because it lived in my mother's cupboards. But a lot of my PlayStation 3 stuff got wrecked. The discs were all perfectly fine because they were kept safe. So, like, I have now successfully replaced a lot of those PS3 games and Xbox games. Granted, that means that I now have doubles. So, like, there's some kind of rare games in that I have twice. So, like, the God of War collection for PS3, I've got that twice. The Prince of Persia collection, I've got that twice. But it's just, the way I see it is it's kind of a backup. But anyway, when I moved from there into my own place, when I put my PS2 games on the shelf, which is over there, I realised that there's a fair few games that I played as a kid that are not there, nor were they in my mother's cupboard, in which case I have absolutely no idea where they went. So over the last, I don't know, year or so that I've been actively collecting games, I've been searching those out. So there's a couple of them on my list. Realistically, I think I've achieved most of it. So just obscure stuff, nothing expensive. Sitting Ducks, if anyone's ever heard of that, I think it's £3. Kokoto platform jumper, also £3. That might be it in terms of replacing games by the look of it. And then outside of that, when it comes to collecting goals, it's usually that the way that I choose a game to collect is, do I want to play it, or do I already own the rest of the franchise and want to finish off owning the franchise? Or would it be cool to have for the sake of content? So for example, Kuon back here, I don't know how in focus that's going to be because of how far back in the room it is, but like that's Kuon right there. And that's a great game to have for content because every time I show it, the video does well. It's just, that's how that is. I'm going to talk about something creators don't talk about because apparently I do that often. I have noticed on not just mine, but like other creators on TikTok, on YouTube that do collecting content, there are people in their comment sections who, based on their username, very clearly are also in the collecting niche, but like maybe earlier on. And they're usually complaining about the way that the collector that they're watching does things. And I don't understand that because collecting is one of those things that doesn't affect anybody else. And it's only something that everybody does their own way. Like, every collector that I watch does things in their own way. For example, I don't collect nearly anything that, for example, Retro Ghetto collects because I think his like biggest goal is the cardboard Nintendo stuff that he wants to have the full collection of. I don't have a single piece of that because it's before my time. It isn't really what I'm interested in. TVM, I know, is pretty much solely Xbox right now. Again, that's like the polar opposite to me. I'm sure there are other collectors that are only after things that I... Just, you see what I mean? Everybody's got their own way of doing things. And yet, it doesn't matter how people do things. I've seen people in their comments complaining about the way they do things. And I don't understand how anybody with a rational thought process can do that. You know? Like, I've seen people... I've just got cramp in my right hamstring. It was leg day. I don't understand how people can get annoyed at the way other people choose to buy and play games. And I see it on TikTok all the time, in fact. Like, when I upload my gaming videos, people will complain about the way that I play games, and I'm just like, well, you can complain about the way I play games, that's lovely, but the good thing about that is that you are also allowed to play your game that you bought with your money in the way that you want. You're welcome to do that. It's crazy. But yeah, so there is no end goal. I don't think there needs to be an end goal. There will probably come a time where there has come a time, like several times already, when I feel like I've got everything that I want, but then I come up with more stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, when I played through those games, I did play them digitally, I should get them physically. For example, 3 games that I've just added to my list that were in that sort of, category are the Ninja Gaiden games. I played through the Master Collection of those on Game Pass like 3 years ago, and I realised like 3 days ago that I don't own them physically, and that means that I've now added them to my list on PlayStation 3. Other times games come out and I'm like, that looks good. I've not played the original though, so I should probably get that. So for example, there it's Space Marine. Interestingly, on CX's website, Space Marine 1 is completely out of stock for both consoles. You can't get it. In other instances, it's filling in parts of a franchise that I otherwise don't have. These are all things that I have said a million times. Like in fact, one dude jumped to my defense against someone else's comment that I saw saying, to be fair, Kale has said a million times he tries to only buy things that he actually has intention of playing. Because, yeah, I do. I play, and this will transition into my next topic, so many more games than I buy most of the time. I play on average about 100 games per year, and not just play, but start to finish. The credits have rolled. Start to beaten. And again, there is a difference between completed and beaten, by the way. Completionism is usually 100% and getting the Platinum Trophy. That's not what I said. Beating, credits rolled, story over, move on. Doing any side stuff that you care to do along the way. I could rant about that one for hours. But yeah, I've always said, again, that I'm a player of games before a collector of games first. There was a bit a couple of months ago where I was spending so much time going out and buying games because it was really fun. I was like just getting into collecting that it was taking away from my time to actually play games, and that was sort of mithering my brain a little bit. Now I think I found a good middle ground between that, and I'm not spending quite as much money as well, which is interesting because it's tax season soon, or it will be, as January approaches, the deadlines anyway, and I'm currently preparing next year's, and I've been making spreadsheets for all of like purchases and things like that for this year, and I have worked out the amount of money that I've spent at CEX since April of this year. If anyone's interested in finding that number out, I could do a video. It's many, many thousand, in case anybody's wondering. I get comments all the time saying CX should sponsor you. They won't. Companies that don't have competition don't need to have sponsored people because they don't need the extra promotion. If you guys want to go and buy a physical game that isn't brand new, if you guys want to go and buy a physical game that isn't a brand new game, your CX is basically your only option of guaranteeing that the game is going to be there when you walk in. Otherwise, you just got to hope that you get lucky walking into a cash converter or a charity shop. You know, somebody asked, "Is everything at CX secondhand?" And it's like, yeah, even new stuff. One guy was like, "How can it all be secondhand when they've even got copies of like Astrobot and like brand new games?" And it's because people genuinely go out and buy brand new games, play it for like 20 minutes, think not for me, and then go and trade it in for a small net loss in terms of what they spent on the game. You know, people get rid of their games pretty rapidly. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, that's another that brings me into my next topic. Somebody said, why do I use spreadsheets to track the games that I've beaten? So for those that don't know, I have a spreadsheet that I call the gamelog. I created it in 2018, and basically I track the games that I have beaten and the dates at which they were beaten because I find it fun. And realistically, I could end that conversation there. That's all the justification that's really required. But I enjoy the fact that I can open my spreadsheet and be like, right, it is September 2024. What was I doing 5 years ago today? What was I playing? Let's go have a look. And I can go have a look. And like, I don't know about you guys, but I tend to associate like memories of things happening around me in life at the same time as like things that I'm doing in my downtime, or just like you'll like attach one memory to another thing that you were doing at the time, and I do that pretty frequently, where I'll be like, oh, this happened in my life at that point, and at the same time that happened, I was doing this. So a perfect example of that is the last time I played through the God of War franchise was just about when I moved into this house. It was literally like within the first couple of weeks. Those two memories are conjoined to me. So if I look at the game log, I'm like, there's the God of War games, and when I beat them, that then brings back a good memory of, oh, that was like the first thing I did in the house. You know what I mean? It's cool to me. I just enjoy it. Like, it's again similar to the whole end goal and collecting different things and everybody to each their own. That topic again. This is generally something I find on TikTok. A lot of people really struggle to get their head around because TikTok is generally a younger audience, or at least an audience that potentially doesn't think through the things that they say before they say it quite as often. But like, people do things differently from each other, and that's just fine. You know, it's like when I was talking about digital versus physical games, about how it really doesn't need to be that war. The more options we have for buying games, the better. You know, but yeah, there is no end goal, and I enjoy collecting. I enjoy logging the games that I've beaten because it's fun, and I like looking back, and it gives me something to do. You know, it's nice to know. For example, time is passing rapidly for all of us, no matter what we do, no matter how we no matter how we choose to spend that time. And I think it's interesting to be able to actually account for that time and look at how I spent it. And the fact that I successfully turned that into a job is pretty cool to me, because I'm like, it's like a timesheet, you know. But like, oh yeah, there's all the hours that I spent, and that was work. It's cool. So, yeah, this was a short Q&A because I only really covered two things. But yeah, there's the answer. Also, what do you think of the new angle? This angle is probably a lot easier to set up than the one I was doing before, because I can leave the tripod set up here and my ring light. In fact, if I turn this off, look how dark it gets. Look at that. So that's a requirement, isn't it? And also having the DVDs and the games in the background I thought was also pretty cool. So yeah, see you in a bit. Hope you enjoyed. Click the follow button if you did. The subscribe button, different platform.